Every COBALT FM transmitter comes with an advanced configs feature that forms part of our advanced automations. Think of a config as an ultra-advanced preset, where you are not limited to just a few basic settings, but virtually all settings can be stored as a config. There are several uses for configs. These include being used with our built-in scheduler or the modulation failover feature. You can have configs set and triggered by either a schedule event or GPIO and SNMP commands too. A simple scenario is when used with the modulation failover, which we will set up as an example in this tutorial. It's as good practice to set up configs before going on air. On this transmitter, we have an analog input with backup audio on a USB stick. First, we need to set up a config for our main program. So, we must assume you have already completed the basic setup steps of setting your frequency, RF power, and input settings. As this will be our main config, let's set that up and save it. Click Automations, then click Configs. You will have no configs showing here. Click New and give it a name that suits the profile. You can then add in a description to further know what the config does. The next step is very important. You must at a minimum select audio processor, an exciter, and stereo. You can of course choose all the options if you want to. In this example, we will choose all the options. Then click Save. If you scroll down, you can see all the save parameters relevant to this actual config. Now we want to save a config that will keep all the same settings, but only change the input that we want to use as a backup audio source, which we will use the USB as the backup source. Click Audio Processor, and then select the processor and option to be Audio Player in and click Save. Go back to the configs and click New and give it a name and description. Make sure you select the used sections again, and then save the config. Now we have both configs. Click the main one you have set and press Activate. Now at the top, we can see the config currently in use. You can also export and import configs. They are very small files and are great for keeping a backup of your setting, or if you have multiple transmitters with similar settings, you can upload these files locally or remotely and save time in your transmitter setup. Now let's set up the modulation failover. Under the Automations menu, you can see the modulation failover. Click that. At the top right, toggle the Enable switch to On. Under the primary source, we need to select from the drop-down what we want it to be. In the case, we will select Main Setting. You will notice that the modulation input does show what the source input is. Click Configure. This will allow you to set the audio threshold. The set delay is where you determine how long you want the silence to be before the changeover takes place. The reset delay determines how long you want to check the audio has returned before going from a backup to a primary source. For an example, we will use 5 seconds for each. Under Backup Source 1, turn the Enable toggle switch on and select the config. Under Configure, you can again set the level and delay, but there is another button called Revert to Primary. What does this do when turned on? If your primary audio is restored, the audio will go back to that source. Now click Save. Let's see it in action. If we cut the main audio source, you will see the primary source change from active to the backup source 1. At the same time, you will see the primary show detector silence. And as the backup source 1 is active, you can see there is no silence being detected. Restoring the main audio, and you can see how it reverts to the primary source automatically. Each time an event like this takes place, it is stored in the logs. You can set up to 3 backup sources in total. Each source must have its own config. The configs can do further advanced functions and switching. Contact us for training on various scenarios.